Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to bring you a holiday special. I'm going to help you ring in the new year by providing you with a special Joe's Basement New Year's Eve countdown, or New Year's countdown, I should say, and 1990, The Basement in Review. Right. Okay. Well, first of all, you know, every New Year's Eve, right? It's a American television tradition to give you countdowns till the new year, so you don't have to look at your watch. Anyway, you know, it's all part of the fun. All is a communal exercise waiting for the next new year to begin. Anyway, well, we here at Joe's Basement have noticed how the networks, like they do with everything else, surround the New Year's Eve countdown with a totally unnecessary amount of fluff and, you know, parades and Bob Hope and, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, well, you know, we're public access. We're down to earth. We're stripped down. We're efficient. And what we just decided to do is, well, make a New Year's Eve countdown a New Year's Eve countdown. Here it is. Our special Joe's Basement darkroom timer, which we've worked hard to calibrate with the good people over at Chicago Access Corporation. We've synchronized it with the guys at Cable Casting, who started the show at exactly 11:30, made sure of that, so that this timer, which we've coordinated such that when it hits 0, it's 1991. I promise. So all you need to do is just watch This Week in Joe's Basement, or, you know, flip back and forth between Bob Hope and, well, the rest of that stuff on our show, and you'll know exactly when the new year begins. Isn't that a great service? See, here it is. No bullshit, no TV personalities, no expensive haircuts, just a timer. Right. Anyway, well, along the way, you know, we can't do a parade. Nor, might I add, would we even be inclined to, could we do a parade? That's beside the point. I'm going to provide you with 1990, The Basement in Review. A look at all the openings of This Week in Joe's Basement. Actually, some are done in '89, but you weren't watching, so that's beside the point. Anyway, we've seen a lot of great things come and go in this year. It's been a good year on the whole. Move the chair from one part of the basement to the other. Change my shirt from Medici to Valois on 53rd Street, but anyway. Cut my hair twice. Washed the shirt a couple times. Eaten lots of different kinds of snack food. Anyway, well, so you get the idea. So let's all sit here together and wait for the new year to begin. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So this week we're going to learn about structural cinema. And for that, I'm going to change my shirt and we're going to go upstairs. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. All right, so this week we're going to learn about people as they actually are in the real world. And for that we're going to get people to tell some jokes, just people, ordinary people on the street, people like you and me. Well, not me since I'm doing the interviewing, but you get the idea. So for that we're going to go out into the real world, to pastures greener. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So this week is the second in our series of shows about people as they actually are. And our technique this week, time around, for learning about people has been to simply nail down a camera in front of them, point it at them, and let the person go on and on and on about whatever happens to be on their mind, really. And we found that as people do this, that they lose their public personality somewhat, and and their self-consciousness about being on camera, and start to reveal who they actually are. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So this week in Joe's Basement, we're going on a field trip to the Museum of Science and Industry, which is a nice place. So let's go. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, we've revamped things a little bit. I got a haircut, lost some weight, got a new t-shirt. Margulies restaurant on 53rd Street. In fact, it's on 1518 East 53rd Street, Margulies. See your food. So it violates two rules. I'm not supposed to advertise. Oops. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to abandon our usual frivolous approach to providing you with some entertaining diversions to help you forget your drab, dull, meaningless lives. And we're going to take on some serious subject matter, namely, death. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. Well, our last take was really interesting, but you don't get to see it. I'm sorry. That's the way it goes in broadcast journalism, television. Anyway, so this week's show we're doing enhanced reality. We've done all sorts of stuff, and we decided to call it enhanced reality. Anyway, we're out of time, so here it is. Ready? Go. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement.
This week we're going to look at people as they actually are again, and people as they actually aren't, just for a variety. Hang on a sec.
Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to tackle a difficult and sensitive social issue, namely race relations between blacks and whites. So the way we decided to approach this is simply to go up to black people and ask them what they think of white people, and to go up to white people and ask them what they think of black people, simply and directly. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement.
I'm Anton, and this is Joe's basement.
I'm Dan, and this is Joe's basement. Got a love, can you tell? I'm Mark, and this is Joe's basement. This week on Joe's basement.
What we're going to do this week is a little experiment wherein we examine the process of storytelling. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So, This Week in Joe's Basement is our 10th anniversary special, a tribute to cigarettes, starring Genghis Alpar as the cigarette man. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in... Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to look at people from different and unusual perspectives to try to see sides of people that you don't usually see, and along the way, examine some questions of self-identity and so forth. What do you want to do, Paul? See, I want to talk about the... I want to talk about this, what we're actually going to do this week, because that's convenient.
Well, you know,
What?
what actually are we going to do this week? I mean, I'm
We're
not
going to
sure.
do well.
It's gone.
I'll say that when I get on the air. But I mean, we're going to run the shorts. We're going to run the sitcom shorts. All, all
okay,
four of them.
okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, what about viewer mail?
We didn't get any. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, I invite you to join me on a personal odyssey I made back to my own high school, where I entered a teenager and exited a teenager, about 4 years older. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So, This Week in Joe's Basement is the second in my series of shows examining the education and the discipline of the young. Last week we took on the teacher's point of view. This week we're going to look at the student's point of view.
Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. As you can see, I'm not Joe. I'm Michelle. Anyway, we're going to go over to Joe now. He's going to eat some dog food.
Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. Hello, I'm Joe, and this is my basement. And, would you zoom in on this, please? This week in Joe's Basement, we're going to respond to viewer mail. Yes, we actually got some viewer mail, and Joe has a promise that he made in episode 13, and he's going to keep it right now. Oh my God. Take a look at this. Oh my God. Okay, so, you see, I was so desperate in episode 13 for some viewer mail that I promised to eat dog food if I got some. Ugh. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. This is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to show you the results of last week's first ever Joe's Basement viewer call-in show. And we did get phone calls. People do actually watch the show. It was quite a shock. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe, and this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, we're going to explore the meaning and the origins of Joe's Basement, culminating in a special presentation of our pilot episode, the very first episode of This Week in Joe's Basement, the television event that shocked the nation, or at least managed to befuddle a few television engineers over at Chicago Access Corporation. Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's basement, we're going to give you people out there in television land a chance to participate in the television making process. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So this week in Joe's basement, we're going to give you the results of our second viewer call-in show. Now, if you recall, our call-in exercise this time around was to ask people what they'd like to see on television. And maybe we'd even take requests and produce material based on them. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's basement, we're going to take our first ever look at college life. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's basement, we're going to address a recurring viewer complaint. We don't have enough women on the show. And we're going to find out why. And we're going to try to find some more women. And maybe we'll want to put some of them on TV. Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's basement, we're going to examine how our actions appear through the eyes of others. First item on that agenda is for me to respond to our first truly vitriolic piece of hate mail. Hi. So I know we're all excited about this whole New Year's Eve countdown thing. Isn't television great? Well, yeah, I thought it needed to break to you that you just missed it by about a minute or so. We fooled you. Ha ha. Happy New Year. No, really, you just missed it. You see why? That's why all those people are cheering out there. You know, they're right. You're wrong. Sorry. Hi. Really, I mean, just because the clock is going to zero doesn't mean it means anything. I mean, you know, you shouldn't. In fact, you shouldn't believe anything you see on TV, and especially not things you see on cheesy public access cable shows. You know, you shouldn't be watching TV anywhere. Go out there and have some fun. It's New Year's.